This show is sponsored by Sevi, answering all your commercial real estate needs. Sevi is the first commercial real estate company committed to the 4 C's: commercial real estate, community, content, and culture. Go visit Sevi at Sevi, SEVI, properties.com. Again, SeviProperties.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today I have a very special guest for you. We have Diana Khan. Diana is attorney at law and owner of DK Law Group, and she owns several other businesses, which we're going to get into as well. Welcome to the show, Diana.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course, the pleasure is all mine. Before we get started and give the audience, a brief glimpse in your personal and business journey, I like to get them to know you a little bit better as far as the business, in case they haven't heard of DK Law Group, what you folks do there.
Sure. So our law firm is mostly Maryland based right now. We are all about people who are trying to grow their financial life, their well-being. So if you're a business planner or you have a business, if you're in real estate, that's really a niche we cover. We talk about how to grow your generational wealth and work with a lawyer side by side. Our law firm is a little bit different because we're not a traditional, let me just bill you hourly and answer questions. We do look at life goals and stay with you throughout them. So we evolve into your life with you and work sort of on making sure that if you are going into investments, we provide that niche where you can talk to a lawyer, also have the means to know kind of the entire wealth building process. So we've been around for a couple years. We are rated as one of the best in the state. And then we also, well, me personally, I was named top 40 lawyers in America under the age of 40 by the American Bar Association. So that's something we're really proud of.
That's awesome. A lot of our audience are entrepreneurs, business owners, or aspiring to be, mostly in the DMV area, but we have listeners from all over the world. So I can't wait to get into as far as what they can do to structure their business and personal life a little better.
Sure, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Let's get into it.
Are you originally from this area?
So I actually grew up in Bulgaria, in Europe. So that's right next to Turkey and Greece. I was there till I was about 10, and then I moved here. Started in DC, which I think is normal for most people coming from Europe. And then you realize you can't afford DC, so you move into the Bethesda area, and then you realize that was a mistake. So my parents slowly made those mistakes, and then we found the affordable niche right here in Baltimore, where they were comfortable with the schools, but also could afford to live. So that's where we ended up, and I've been here since.
Oh, that's great. So you lived in Bulgaria. You were born there and lived there all until you were 10 when you immigrated here.
Yeah, and then my brother, he's 13 years older than me. So when we sit together at a bar, he has a very, very big accent and I don't. So I tell him I'm the lucky one because you can tell he's a foreigner, whereas most people are like, wow, you're from another country. I would have never guessed.
Yeah. If I can take you for a brief moment back to Bulgaria, Diana, how was it growing up there? Like, what were you into? Any activities you remember you liked? How was life back there?
So Bulgaria is very, very different. So, I was born in 88, to show my age, but communism had just ended in 88. So my parents were very affluent, so we were actually pretty lucky, but Bulgaria was definitely like either you were affluent and could like afford life or not. So it was very a stark difference because I happened to be on the better side of it, but I had quite a different perception. And because communism had just ended and I grew up there, it was just very different than here in the US. I remember when I got here and my parents took me to the Disney store, which I know sounds really silly, but everything in Bulgaria was about like 15, 20 years behind. So when I went to the Disney store, there were all these things I'd never seen, so many toys. And I remember I had like a hyperventilating experience because we just didn't have a lot of the luxuries that the US did, at least at that time.
Yeah, no, it's so true. My wife was born in Ukraine and the former USSR, and she always tells me stories how she remembers standing in line with my in-laws, her parents, and just to get to the basic grocery store and get bread or milk, and it would just be a long line around the block.
Yep, exactly. So I remember that, I remember, even though communism had ended right when I died, a lot of that stuff took a while to like break up. So now, even when I visit, my husband often says that he always feels like Bulgaria is about 10 years behind than where we are. And I felt that way growing up too. So it was a huge stark difference for me moving here just because we were so behind. Like we didn't I remember we were one of the only families that had a TV back in the 80s. And like, here it was just a household item. So it was just very different growing up. So when I speak to people that are older than me, I'm like, I remember that TV show. And they're like, how? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I grew up in a country where that's what we watched, like we were just behind. Like that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah. So then you come here, you basically have everything at your disposal. I mean, even more options that did you ever have back home?
Right. Yeah. So my dad likes to tell the story that he took me to the same Disney store like 6 months later, and I was not even impressed. He told me I could have anything in the store, and I walked out and I said I didn't like anything. And it's that's how quickly you get accustomed to something, right? Like it was such a stark difference when I moved here, and then like 6 months later, I was like, nothing in there is impressive. And you just kind of, I think the luxuries of you get used to them.
Yeah. I understand when you came here, you first went DC, then you continued heading up north to Bethesda, then the Baltimore area. Did you do eventually high school around the Baltimore area?
I did, yeah. So I grew up in Pikesville, so I did the whole like Pikesville Middle, Pikesville High, and I went all public school. It was at that time Pikesville was rated to be one of the best schools in the country, and I think uh, knowing my mom and her fierce dedication to education, I think we literally moved there just so I could go to that school. Which now that I'm a mom, I realize a lot of people do.
Yeah, yeah. In high school, did you know Diana as far as maybe you wanted to go into the legal profession, or what were you into in high school?
So, getting into trouble, that was my thing. I grew up with a mother who very much wanted me to be a surgeon or a lawyer. So I didn't really think about what I enjoyed. I just knew I had to be one of those two things. But I couldn't have been a doctor because I got diagnosed with diabetes when I was younger, and I just did not enjoy it. I also, my whole family is full of doctors. My brother's a surgeon. So I felt like I had to be the black sheep. And that's just kind of like my motto in family is just, I'm going to go the other way. So when I couldn't become a doctor, I decided to be a lawyer. And um, it was right after undergraduate that I actually decided to take some time off and actually figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up working for a law firm that was doing short sales, which is, when houses are underwater. And it was right around 2000, 2008 to 2010 when short sales were a thing. So they were not regulated. I took 6 months off before law school to do short sales, and I ended up spending like 3 years in the real estate industry before law school and got really into real estate, which is, I think, the trajectory that I ended up going to law school, but in a whole different trajectory than I had originally planned.
And your focus in law school then was somewhere to something related with real estate.
Oh, of course not. I told myself I was never going to go back to real estate. I was like, I don't like realtors. I'm going to go do like corporate law, or I'm going to go do all these other things. But, it was really difficult to do other stuff because I just had so much knowledge on real estate. And two, most people will tell you lawyers make a lot of money, and it's just not true. So when I came out of law school, I struggled a little bit, and it made sense to go back into real estate because that's where my niche was. That's where I knew everybody. I was able to get more clients. So I had a real estate brokerage license. I opened a brokerage and told myself my law firm would sort of grow second to my real estate career. And then now it's sort of, it was real estate career and then law, and now it's sort of bypassed where law has overcome the real estate aspect.
Oh wow. So when you were starting off, the focus was let me focus on was it more real estate investment or real estate transactions, brokerage side of things, or
It was a little bit of both. I
okay.
I am very entrepreneurial. I did not want to work for anybody. So I came out of law school. I worked for a few law firms, and I just did not like working for others. So I wanted to, my goal is to retire by 50 and, have my kids have a good education and do what I enjoy. And I don't want to get stuck in the 9 to 5. So you can't really do that working for a law firm. You can't really do that working a 9 to 5 unless you're growing something else. So the idea really was to do traditional real estate and then invest more into rental properties. And I started doing that. And slowly but surely, I think having the legal knowledge and having the real estate knowledge, I kind of became the person everybody would call for legal advice, even though my solo practicing firm wasn't doing much. So I was like, well, might as well monetize it. So, you know, if you Google me, I think from like a year prior, people just knew me as Diana. And now it's like Diana's like this lawyer that all does this real estate stuff. And she's this and she's that. Because all I did was just turn on the marketing to something I was already doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was most of the clientele for the law firm just coming from your network in real estate, or how was that?
Yep, all real estate. It was all just the network. And then when I started marketing, I leaned into the real estate community as well. So I started marketing, within the like real producers magazines and offering those services. And then it's slowly but surely, because I have a title company as well, I have a real estate brokerage. And then I do a lot of LLC startups and I do a lot of estate planning. So it just kind of worked because realtors, when you buy a house, you're usually thinking about life changes. You're thinking about starting a business or, getting a prenuptial or getting a divorce. So a lot of those things fall into the law firm. So it was really easy to market to the niche of people who trusted me and like, would be willing to give me a try and then kind of pivoting into that. So it came naturally. It took a lot of hard work, but it worked.
Yeah. With all these businesses, which I understand they sort of feed off each other, which is great. There's a synergy there. How is your time divided with handling all these things?
So I think between me and my business partners, we have a staff of about 60 or 70. I think we counted this morning, it was like 63 employees. So it's we're working now a little bit more on branding because people think it's just me, but you can't effectively run a business if it's just you. So
Of course.
my I really enjoy law. That's kind of where my main bread and butter is, and I feel like there's a lot of disconnect for people between the ages of 30 to 55 and getting lawyers involved. Most of my friends in the same age group as me are like, I'm not going to hire a lawyer unless I need one. And I'm really trying to change that mindset that if you want to run a business, you want to grow your wealth, you want to, make strides to retire early, you need to be working with a lawyer prior to needing one. Because if you're not, then that's going to end up really backwards for you, especially because if you are in the real estate industry, like most of my clients are, you've got a bunch of rentals. I tell people the more successful you are, the more likely you're going to get sued. Like it's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that we live in America and, the more you're doing, the more you're going to be susceptible to liability. So it's building out that branch to protect yourself ahead of time is key.
If someone's listening to this, Diana, and they want to start a business, any type of business, what's some legal advice you would advise them as far as they need to have before they get everything started?
So, from a business perspective, make sure your business structure is set up, which I know sounds really silly, but a lot of people say, I'm going to start an LLC and I'm just going to, do it and I'm not going to do well. Well, I'm going to come back and I'm going to worry about the books or I'm going to worry about QuickBooks. I'm going to worry about the operating agreement because I'm just starting out and I'm trying to figure it out. Well, the problem is, and this happened to me too, is if you're not doing it ahead of time to plan and make sure everything's right, it might be too late. So, even with my law firm, as good as I am at a lot of things, my law firm marketing just boomed. And with that, I boomed. So next thing I know, now it's 2 years in, and I'm cleaning up my own books because life just got so busy that I didn't do those little things you should have done ahead of time to sort of protect yourself. And that's the susceptibility to just really liability in general. Um, the second, on a personal level, I'd probably tell people if you don't know what a trust is, get a trust. And I'm happy to kind of walk people through it. But I grew up with the idea that trusts are for rich people. And now that I'm a business owner and very successful at what I do, it's really just trusts are for smart people, people who want to grow their wealth and protect it for those that come after them.
Yes, please. If someone's listening, they're like, "What is a trust?" I was like, "Do I trust you? What does it entail?"
Yeah, there you go. So with a trust, the whole idea really is let's put the trust aside for a second. So in your life, everything you own fits in a backpack. In the world that I live in, everybody's walking around with these book bags with all of our stuff in it. So the idea of you creating a business is really you just take a water bottle and you're putting in a knapsack inside that backpack, right? So when you don't set up your LLC right, in a normal life, what lawyers try to do is they try to break that corporate seal. People, you've probably heard of that term before, and that's you're not running like a business, or maybe you're not doing your books accurately. And if I can prove that when you set up your business, you didn't do it in a way that's accurate, you just set it up to protect yourself from liability, I then like break that corporate seal. In the book bag example, when I break the corporate seal, I'm literally puncturing this water bottle that's in your book bag that mixes with your personal life. It mixes with, your house. It mixes with, your bank account. So this whole idea is that when you puncture that corporate seal, or the corporate veil, if you will, you're just getting everything in that bag wet. So you're exposing your liability. So your kids at home or your niece or your nephew or the money you've built up is now susceptible in the business that you created. So the idea of a trust really is the fact that instead of walking around with this book bag, that even if you don't have a business, eventually when you die, your family has to get that bag, take it to a courthouse, get permission to open it, get permission to wind down your life, pay taxes on what you've built up, and then eventually get it. You actually come into my office and you say, hey, I don't really like this concept. Let's find a better way. And we create what's called a trust. And the idea of a trust is you come into my office and you say, let's build a new backpack. And this new backpack is going to be something that we create together. And it doesn't actually belong to me, it belongs to my children and it belongs to my cousin or whoever you want to give things to. I'm gifting this backpack to my children now, but it's not a gift that they can take now. It's a gift that I'm going to give to them in the future when a triggering event occurs, such as death or incapacity or a lawsuit, right? So now what you've done is you have your backpack on, but you have a new backpack that you've created with me. That backpack, you are controlling it, but you do no longer own it. So we essentially, for those picturing this like, image that I'm giving is then we put everything into the trust. And to put everything into the trust, we open your personal bag, we empty it into the trust bag. Now your bag is empty. So what happens is one of three things. A, if you get sued, nobody can touch the trust because that is a gift you've given to somebody in the future. Since it's no longer yours, even if you're controlling it, liability can't come out of it because you've already gifted it to somebody else. They can only take stuff out of your bag and you've emptied it. So there's no liability on you there. The second aspect is that when you die, that's a triggering event. So unlike a will where you say, hey, you can have my stuff, and then we have to get permission from the courts, the triggering event literally just means that your children pick up the bag and move on. And that's it. So with a trust, there's a lot of like protection in place when you're a business owner because there's that liability protection. And there's also an aspect of control because unlike a regular will, when you say you get my stuff or, sell my business and all this happens, when you create a trust, you're actually creating an entity that it's basically a make your own adventure. You can write what you want to occur or how you want it to occur. So people are thinking, well, what would I do? For my example, just because I have young kids, it's very easy to understand in layman's terms. If I die and my kids are under 18, my brother, who's going to handle the bag for me because my kids are too young to pick it up themselves, is now told that 20% of my wealth is to be used for them under the age of 21, only for health, education, and wellness. So now I'm limiting the wealth that I've created for my family into the future. And I've said that the house I live in cannot be sold. And the businesses that I've created are going to support the ability to sell that house. So those are all parameters I've built into my wealth planning that now is going to preserve what I've built up. And then from the ages of 21 to 35, my personal trust says that, hey, I'm not going to, my children can use 20% of the wealth from 21 to 35 for education. And if they don't want to have an education, they want to go travel the world, great. You're just not going to get an inheritance, whether or not that's $10 or $1 million. You're not going to get it because if you're not getting an education, really, you can go get a job at a bar or figure out what you want to do with your life. And then 25 to 35, my particular trust says that they can use an additional 20% of my wealth for real estate investments as long as they qualify for the loan on their own. And then 35 and up, they get the rest of it. So now what I've done is I've created, this entity almost of my personal belongings that A, protects me while I'm alive and have all these businesses because everything I've built up is for my kids. So I've done this liability protection. Two, I've made it easier when I pass so that my kids can just sort of pick up the bag and avoid legal fees and avoid taxes and all of that. And then three, I've now created a generational wealth that's going to protect them for the time to come and left very detailed plans on how my businesses are going to be run if something happens to me. And that is a room for success that a lot of people don't leave for their children or for those they love.
Are there different
That's
types
the overview.
are there different types of trust, Diana?
Mhm. So just like anything else, there's a lot of different types of trust. The one I just spoke about is a revocable living trust. So trust that you can open and close that backpack at any time prior to death. A irrevocable trust, a trust you cannot change, is the same concept, but you can't open or close the bag. You can still control it, but the make your own adventure that you write cannot be changed after the initial decision to make it. So there is that particular trust, an irrevocable one, is good for two things. A, it's great for Medicaid planning. So if you think I have a lot of assets, I'm not going to qualify for government benefits and all of that. Well, when you have an irrevocable trust, that's not an asset that you own anymore. You're just controlling it. So you qualify for a lot for Medicaid as you age. And then two, it also allows you to do things like business partnerships in an ironclad way where you can invest stuff into something with ideas with somebody else that it's not going to get changed. There's also special needs trusts, which are more for if you have a child that's special needs or somebody in your life that you're caring for, it's specific for their care. So the trust would supplement income for them, but only after they've qualified for the government benefits that are currently withstanding them. So there's quite a lot of different types of trusts, and depending on the goals, we just kind of look at what you want to do with them.
And the example you just gave is now your personal example. You mentioned if something were to happen to you, if they're still younger, I think you said your brother would have some type of authority as far as with the trust, right?
Yes, exactly. So, my kids are going to be the beneficiaries of that trust. That's to me is I'm creating it for my kids. I'm creating my wealth for my kids. But I love my brother. I don't want him raising my kids, but he's great with money. So I've created it so that somebody else is the guardian of my kids if I pass away at a younger age, but then my brother manages it until they're old enough to manage it themselves. So I've set them up in a way successful there as well. Now we build in provisions that if my brother's not doing a good job, my children will be able to hire a lawyer or be able to like contest some of that. But again, you have a lot more control with the trust on what happens. And very similarly, with the trust, if something happens to me and I'm not passed away, well, what happens to your bag if you don't have a trust, right? Like your children have to have a power of attorney, they have to care for you, all of that. With a trust, getting sick is a triggering event. So the same thing kicks in, but now there's provisions on my brother on how to care for me. Like if money is limited and I'm on life support, does he care for my life support? Does he care for my kids' education? And those are choices that I've put down and valued for myself.
Is there a benefit or what are the pros and cons as far as having the guardian being another family member, for example, whether your cousin, your sister, your aunt, grandparent, or maybe the other parent, your significant other of the child, of the children?
So I think it's difficult, right? When you die or like when you pick a guardian for your children, your intention is for them to care for them. But money is weird, life is weird, right? And the idea really is that when you die with just a will, you can't say what happens to the money. You can just say my kids get it. Well, if your kids are under the age of 18, whoever's their guardian is going to get it. But what happens if the person you named as guardian is no longer available? Or what happens if they themselves have a medical situation or anything like that? They actually are the ones controlling all of it because your kids are not old enough and they're their guardian. So you're able to sort of separate the guardianship aspect from the financial, which I think
Mm,
also opens up the door of picking a guardian that would be right. I'm no longer considering just finances because if I was just considering finances, my brother's a surgeon, he's top in the country, like he can provide for my kids more than probably my mother-in-law who's 60 and she is on social security or whatever it is.
mhm.
But for my values, probably my mother-in-law might raise my kids a little better. So it's just this idea of separating the two allows me to do better of choosing finances versus nature and nurture and caring.
Mhm. And in this trust, like you said, you're putting everything in this backpack. You're putting real estate, business interests. Now, what happens if some of these assets are held in different partnerships? So there's other people that control them as well. Does that affect
Yep.
anything at all? Or
So all it does is we just structure your partnerships that your portion of your ownership goes to the trust. So, we have your LLC, the trust owns the LLC. So you own the trust. So it's sort of like almost like a tunnel. So if you have a LLC or a partnership that's got two people in it, your 50% is owned by the trust and you own the trust and you have that decision-making skills. The other 50 is the same as though, if you have a partnership without any succession planning in place, it's just going to go to wherever they planned. And if you do have partnerships, you have LLCs, you should be looking at those buy-sell agreements when you have somebody in the LLC or the partnership that's not family, because you need to talk about, well, how are you going to care for my wife? How do we take care of that? And those are questions that need to be answered.
that's interesting, especially if you're a business owner and you have this business and like you said, maybe someone sues you or whatever. And then even though you have LLC, they may try to go after your personal belongings. But now if you have this trust, it's another protection per se, right?
Right, right, exactly. So, it's a very smart tool. It's definitely not, a cheap tool, but certainly one of the things that I think people don't realize is that if you pass away without any plans, a trust is very effective prior to death. And two, if you do pass away with no plans in place, the money my law firm charges for a trust is very similar to the money I charge for somebody who's lost their mom and has no plans in place. The difference is that the people who I'm helping whose mom passed away with no plans are grieving. And that's a very hard time to be able to think about finances or think about anything else because you're trying to like live in the memory of the person that's passed away and also make financial decisions, which is very difficult at that time. And really, when you set up a trust, you really should be talking about, let me protect those I love. And let me, even prior to death, let me make sure if I'm going to be a business owner, if I'm going to be doing something as risky as real estate, where real estate investments are one of the most litigated aspects in the country when it comes to like, squatters, landlords, tenants, all sorts of issues, you want to set up that everything you're working for is protected at home. And it's there for the reason that we're all working, right? I mean, some of us are working because we just really enjoy it, but most of us are working to provide for either a child, a parent, or maybe the lifestyle that you enjoy with, going on vacation. And not setting yourself up means that you're not really setting yourself up for success.
You just mentioned now, as far as establishing a trust might not be that cheap. Any idea as far as cost range? If someone's listening to this and like, huh, this is definitely interesting, something I should look into. How much are they looking at?
I think between 3 to 6,000 is a good aim, depending on your asset values. It can vary. I would say that if you meet a lawyer that says I can do it less than three, I would be very cautious to use that lawyer because it's quite a lot of work. But it also depends on where your assets are. I have some clients that pay me upwards of 30 to 40,000, but they've got 150 investment properties, and we're redoing their LLCs and their trusts, and it's a network where we also build out holding companies to hold the LLCs. So it's not just the more stuff you have, the more of the evolution is of protection.
Sure, sure, that makes sense. Wow, this is great. Speaking about real estate, all I do is just focus on commercial real estate, and I know we're talking about estate planning and trust, but now you mentioned real estate. If you're a business owner, you're renting a place. This is commercial, right?
Mhm.
Speaking about commercial residential, as far as laws and regulations, a lot of differences, very different.
Commercial is easier, believe it or not. I think that commercial, it's not easier. I think it's just more black and white. And I like the idea of black and white because with residential, when you're doing like leases, for example, there's a lot of like, oh, we prefer tenants' rights. And like maybe the tenant will have some sort of ethos to the judge. So while the rules are there, I kind of say it's the Wild Wild West. I like commercial because it's very black and white. Like, you have personal guarantees in there. If you move out and you ended the lease early, it's just a contract lease breach. Like, it's a lot easier to navigate. But again, you have to make sure you're set up right to begin with to make sure your protections are in place.
Yeah. Now, I've seen many times, Diana, commercial landlords going in, and I don't know, they don't go through the full eviction process. You probably know more than I do as far as what it takes to all this. But all of a sudden, they just lock the tenant out, whether belongings are in there of the business or not. What are some let's say if you're a business owner, what
Mhm.
is something that needs to happen before something like that were to occur and they get locked out of their space?
Look at your lease. Their commercial landlords are putting into the lease that if you defaulted on the loan and they send you a certified letter and give you a deadline, they will be able to lock you out. So, one of the things is negotiate up front. If your lease is silent on that, then they can't just close the door and move you out. There's got to be some sort of judicial process. But a lot of the time there isn't. And your commercial lease also has things like default judgment language in there that if you fall behind, there's no lawsuit, like you're just guilty of not paying. So most people think it's like, oh, it's just a standard commercial lease. Yeah, it's a standard commercial lease, but it's usually 10 years versus one in residential. And, it's got, triple net, it's got CAM, it's got quite a lot in there. So if you're not digging into that lease and you're not really negotiating those terms, again, you're not prepping for worst case. As a lawyer, I don't think any one of us really plan to default a contract when we go into it. But you should know worst case when you work with a lawyer of like, hey, like what are the worst case scenarios so that and you can prep accordingly. If you know your lease has a personal guarantee, but you have a trust, there's a little bit more protection in there. So there's a lot of things in there you can consider if you're doing it right.
I'm glad you brought that point up. So if there is a personal guarantee on the lease, but you do have a trust, then there's really nothing, they can't go after you personally because everything's in your trust, correct?
So, a revocable trust is still, you can still go after it, but I tell people it's all about like metrics, right? Like if you have a personal guarantee and all of your stuff is in your personal name, I can tell you within 2 minutes at my law firm, I can figure out what kind of car you drive, what your mortgage amount is. I can do a lot. But if I Google you or like I do the same search and I just find a trust, trusts have a lot more protections. So while I can't really say with a revocable trust you have no assets because that protection is much better in an irrevocable trust, the thing is that as a lawyer, I now know I have like five more hurdles to try to get that personal guarantee enacted. And there's sometimes when I tell my clients it's not worth it with the trust. It's not worth the litigation that you're going to create to show that the trust was created just to avoid that personal guarantee. So there's that aspect of it as well. And depending on the state you're in, trusts also have a seasoning period where it has to be in compliance and you have to have created it at least one or two, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years prior to defaulting on a guarantee, right? Like if you are listening to this and you're going to default on your personal guarantee in 2 months from now, there's no way a trust can protect you. There just isn't. But that's why we talk about, take the steps ahead of time and take them early.
Besides that initial fee to establish the trust, whether it's 3 to 6 or more thousand, is there any upkeep to maintain it?
So not really. Some law firms will charge what's called like a month, like a yearly fee of anywhere between $500 to $1,000. I personally don't charge those because I think that that's just lawyers not being able to get repeat business. That's just my opinion. The reason that trusts exist is so that you don't have to continuously update them. However, it's a living, breathing contract. It's got a lot of changes. So when you have life changes, expect to go back to your trust and revisit it. You move from one state to another, sure, trusts work in all states, but maybe go to a lawyer in the state you move to look at the tax benefits. If your children get married and they were 10 when you created the trust, you need to do some upkeep. So it is some upkeep, but I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea of pay a lawyer every year to just change a statute. That trust should be able to kind of survive on their own in that essence. If you have a high equity trust, like with a lot of money, and you have somebody like handling it for you, there's trustees as third parties that'll invest stocks and bonds through a trust, then they typically charge 1% of the trust value. But we're talking about like multimillionaires who are using trusts in a different capacity. I think most of your listeners, maybe some, would be able to benefit from that. But for the most part, the answer is no. You should not have kind of like a monthly or yearly upkeep if you're doing it right. It should sort of stand on its own.
I know you mentioned earlier that, it all started first with real estate, with your interest in real estate and law, and then sort of law has surpassed it. But I understand also you have several other businesses. What role do they play?
So I started in real estate, so I have a real estate brokerage, and then I had title company. Obviously, if you're buying real estate, you're doing any of that, you're using those two systems quite a lot. And then I do a lot of home flips. I myself own about 100 rentals, so we have a property management company that sort of, we manage it for other people who are looking for either residential or commercial management. And then we also have a in-house contracting company, so that if you do need something fixed, you're not hiring a third party. So I do kind of vertically integrate the businesses across so that when you become a client of our law firm, it could be a one-stop shop if that's what you're looking for. Or if you're kind of what I call the niche client, which is somebody looking into real estate, whether or not commercial or residential, you've got somebody who's got experience in all of the buckets and can help you with even the smaller stuff, such as doing a quick claim deed or helping you transfer a deed over.
That's great. Yeah, they all help each other out.
Right, exactly.
You said that not recently, maybe I think you said 2 years ago, the marketing for the law firm just caught wildfire and just went crazy. What was it that did you do anything differently, or what happened then?
I used to talk about trust more like as a financial aspect, kind of like we're talking about now. But about 2 years ago, my mom got really sick and she didn't have any of her affairs in order. And I think I didn't conceptualize the emotions and the grief that happens when somebody gets really sick. So I realized that really, when you meet somebody in their 30s or 40s, they don't have most of the stuff set up. And then when you meet somebody in their 50s and 60s, they're successful and they have it set up. And when you talk to those two entities and you ask them, why did you set up a trust? Or why did you, do a buy-sell agreement for your LLC? The answer is always the same, which is, oh, somebody died or something bad happened and I just lost the year. And that's exactly what happened to me. I lost the year because my mom got really sick and she didn't have anything in order. And I kind of had this realization that, yes, it's about finances, but most people don't want to talk about finances with a lawyer. But if I come up to you and I say, hey, do you want your mom to wear a bra when she gets buried? They all look at me like I'm nuts. And I'm like, that's a question they're going to ask you. That is a question that you get asked when somebody passes away. So there's quite a lot that people don't realize you get asked of, and quite a lot people don't plan for. So when my mom got sick herself, I was like, wow, there's just a slew of people between the ages of 30 to 50 who are not thinking about this till the worst comes. And we need to make this more accessible. So I started kind of pivoting the way I market it from just finances to also, I've been there. I get it. I'll be there for it. You know, you have somebody who's dying in a hospital, like that's not the time to talk to you about a trust. But if you're not there, you know, I'll meet you there as well. So we just kind of talked about quite a lot and centered it. So I pivoted my law firm marketing to kind of focus on the whole human element rather than just, you know, the billables, which I think made a huge difference.
Now, if someone's listening to this and they say, well, shouldn't, as far as whether she wears a bra in the casket or not, shouldn't that be in the will or anything, not, or anything else, or no?
It's not in the will. It's not in the will. It's a burial preference. You know, my staff actually, we went to like the closest 5 or 6 or 7 funeral homes, and we asked all the questions that were asked, and we put a questionnaire together. But it's not in the will. And you know, when my mom got sick, she thankfully she's okay, but her chance of survival was less than 2%. And you know, she was in the ICU for 6 months. And I remember, I'm not an emotional person. I definitely am not like very cryy, for lack of a better word. And the doctors told me to go get a blanket for her because the ICU blanket was giving her an allergic reaction. And I went to Target and I just stared at these blankets and I started thinking the stupidest things like, well, you know, the blanket is red and that's her favorite color. She's going to get out of the hospital and she's going to hate the red color. And it just, I started going down this like frenzy of thinking about the things that, you know, were more about my mom and my grief and not about the logistical of buying her a blanket. So that's kind of where I started pivoting a little bit and talking about the fact that there's a lot that a will doesn't cover, and having a lawyer who's seasoned as a business owner help you navigate from a financial standpoint, but also a family standpoint is key to working to the best success.
That's great. Dana, you have such a rich business and entrepreneurial career. What would you say you're most proud of thus far?
I think it's just the fact that I take legal terms and make them easy. One of the things that I think I'm most happy about is the fact that I am very successful in everything I've sort of put my foot into. But everybody I talk to tell me that one of the reasons they work for me is because I'm real. And I really enjoy the fact that I have broken away from doing what's expected and pivoting into just kind of who I am and it working for me. Now, maybe if I had a weird personality or a weirder personality, that wouldn't have been as well. But I really enjoy the fact that I fully kind of gotten comfortable with being myself and it's led to success, which I'm really proud of.
You just mentioned now that you've been successful in most of your endeavors. I'm sure throughout your career you've had some setbacks or failures. Can you remember of any? And if so, what did you learn from that?
You know, I don't believe in like, yes, I've had quite a lot of things that I didn't do well in. A lot of them. I mean, we all lived through COVID together. I mean, it is what it is, but it's just sort of the ability to believe in yourself and pivot whatever way you can to just put into yourself is kind of the success or moral value that I had. You know, a couple years ago, I remember I was at this like top real estate agent gathering that we do twice a year, and it was like around the holidays, and I was looking around the room, and we were all talking about interest rates going high, and I remember my bank account had like no money in it, and I was like very stressed out because it was just, you know, I wrote the high of 2020, the like low interest rates and all that. My title company was doing great. We were doing like 60 refis a month. And, you know, refis are a lower income value, but they're so much easier to work with. So, like, you know, we were just like riding for a while. And then all of a sudden, it all came crashing down. And, you know, if I could have said, wow, like I have less money in my account, I'm not going to do well. And it's not really that I failed, it's just that I put my money all into just one basket, which was real estate. And then it took a plunge. So, you know, I pivoted. If you look at now, I've sort of vertically integrated across the board. So if I don't do well in one, I know that I have income in other. And two, be okay with being uncomfortable. You know, just don't say this doesn't work for me because I don't like it. I firmly believe in trying everything for 90 days, whether or not if you have the financial means to try a new marketing strategy or you have the ability to do something for 90 days, whether or not it's going to the gym or, you know, working with your kids, whatever it is, give it 90 days and you'd be surprised. And that 90-day model really works well for me.
That's great. Speaking, you mentioned title and real estate altogether there. It just made me think, I think it was this week or last week, I was hearing a real estate investor talk, and they were talking about how they invested in a title company as a LP, as a limited partner. And they were just saying how they were just their title company is a fantastic business. All my distributions I'm getting, I got my original capital investment back, and some is the best investment ever. I guess, can you second that? Is that true since you're involved in all these businesses, or no?
I don't, I think that there's definitely money in title, but I definitely think as an investment with somebody else who's running it, sure. I definitely have a few LPs who come in and like, yes, it's definitely a threshold where you can make your money back. I think it's just not the lucrative design of somebody who wants to grow. It's a good, vertically integrated business where you can get more money from it. But if you're thinking like, let me start a title company all on my own, don't do it. It's just not that profitable if you're doing it in and of itself, because honestly, it's not unique, right? Like you don't, most people will not know what a title company is. They will not know the buyer has a right to choose. So it's just, you're going into a marketing perspective that's hard. But if you're looking to partner with one and you have the sway or the means to get clients into it, then of course it's going to be profitable.
You speaking about profitability and you being exposed to all these different businesses that are somewhat real estate related, what would you say in your experience is the most profitable for you that you like?
I think it's a law firm for now. I really like that. I really also like flipping houses. I really enjoy, buying a house. I know the word flipping, there's probably a lawyer somewhere listening to this, like dying in their grave that I said it. But the concept of buying a house, reconstructing it and selling it again, to me is a very lucrative way to get money into my pocket that's very effective because, I'm the cash flow, if you have it, use it to your advantage. It's not doing you any good service to keep it in your savings account. It just isn't.
Do you try to hold the house for under 12 months as far as capital gains, or are you not concerned with that at all?
I do a lot of 1031 exchanges. That's,
Okay.
I hang out a lot of 1031 exchanges. And then, there's the step up tax basis as well with the trust that allows you to have some tax limitations there as well.
Yeah. With all the different businesses, I'm sure you have to have a great team running behind every single one of them. How you go about choosing the right partners, the right team members to put in the right seat in the bus?
It's hard. It's very hard, and I firmly stick by the whole 90-day routine. So most of my staff, when they get hired, they get paid very low for 90 days. And, it's this is what is at the end of those 90 days, but you're going to do quite a lot. You're going to see what the companies are about. I'm going to throw you into marketing. I'm going to throw you into this. And it's really because I don't hire with the idea of filling in job descriptions. I don't think that works. I think that most people, when you do an interview, are going to tell you that they're people. Like they're very good at marketing. Whatever you're hiring for, you're going to hear that in an interview. So with me, I have a high threshold of losing people in the first 90 days. But those who stay after the 90 days, on average, will stay for years. I'm 35 and one of my employees has been working for me for 13 years. So that sort of gives you that broad scope of ideas. It's just don't create job descriptions to make people fit into them. If somebody who's working for you is showing you what they're good at, don't think you know more than them. Your job as a boss is not to tell people how to do their job. It's so that you don't have to think about it. And if you're not thinking about it and they're doing it well, it's a good relationship. Even if they were hired to do something else for you, find a way to utilize your people at what they enjoy most.
So you hire Mary or Joe for XYZ position and you tell them it's a 90-day trial. You're instead of getting paid Y, you're going to get paid much lower. And then from there, we reevaluate. Is that how it works?
Yep. Yeah, we do a 30, a 60, and a 90 day, and it's both. It's just, does this work? I've had people I've hired without like even like longer than a 2-minute interview, and I'm like, yeah, nothing you tell me is going to be true. And I just say things like, listen, like we're sink or swim. It's busy as hell. Like stay up to date. And like most people are like, yeah, okay, I'm ready. And then people come in here and they're like, I did not believe you. And I was like, yep.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, and people that work for me, they know that I only have, I think, 3 or 4 rules, and they're very simple, which is, have good work ethic, be honest, don't lie, and if, own your mistakes. Like those are the 3 things, and then that's it. Like those are the simple rules. And believe it or not, most people can't cut it past those 3 rules because own your mistakes, you know, have good work ethic, sort of, all of these things require more than just, the sentence it falls on.
Yeah. It's like a survival of the fittest.
Oh yeah. I'm hiring, by the way, if you're interested.
I'm sure. So I would say probably within the 90-day period, what I guess 80 of them drop out at the end, or I'm sure it's high, right?
Yes. So I recently started hiring VAs in the Philippines who help with a lot of the back end work for my staff.
Uh-huh.
And I hired one VA and she did great. And then we were just so bottlenecked because I was like so busy. And I put out an ad on Facebook in a Philippines VA group. And I was like, I'm hiring, a VA. And I hired six of them at one night. And I was like, all of you guys are getting paid for 3 hours, $3 an hour. Your regular pay is gonna be 7 to 8 if you can make it past the 2 weeks. And then I just called my VA in the Philippines and I was like, congratulations, you have seven other employees. And she was like, you're insane. And I'm like, we fired the first one like 3 hours in the next day. But we told them it's on the job training. Like, the job is not guaranteed. It's just really show up and see what you can do.
You said you fired four out of the six 3 hours later?
No, one of them the next morning, 4 hours in, did not make it.
Oh,
And
okay.
she didn't even like, I didn't even fire her. Most people don't, like, I don't fire people. Most time people just come
Just
to me and they're
quit.
like, yeah, it's not for me. Yeah.
Or they just don't show up anymore. Like, huh, I wonder.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I have high expectations and, I'm very blessed because I have quite a lot of good employees.
Oh, that's good. Are there any specific habits or traits you feel that you have, Diana, that helped you, whether on the business or even just on the personal side of things?
I think just really sitting with that discomfort for me is a big one because if you don't know who you are, you can't acknowledge the mistakes, right? Like there's a lot of the time as a business owner that, I used to make the joke, I'm very good at fake apologizing, right? But really, it's not fake apologizing. You just have to start owning what you do and what you don't do. And you're not going to be a successful business owner until you know where your faults are. And that's not what are my faults today and then like let's work on them for 6 years. It's always evaluate, always pivot, always triage because there's always going to be something you're not looking at and be open to getting feedback, whether or not it's from a client that fired you or it's from somebody who loves you to death because everybody has feedback and that's kind of what makes you successful.
That's good. What would you say is your biggest challenge with your role today at the business?
Right now, my biggest challenge is I'm growing to a degree that's a little bit hard to manage. So, I've actually brought in a business partner and it's a struggle because I'm used to just being successful on my own. And sometimes, I talk to the business partner and I'm like, I'm not really sure I need you in my life. Like I'm not really sure. And it's this idea of if you want to get somewhere, sometimes you have to lean on somebody, even if you can do it yourself. So for me, it's like I can do it better by myself. And that's just kind of been the motto, but you can't do everything. So for me, the struggle is sort of acknowledging that like you could be good at a lot of things, but you need to sort of learn to give control up when necessary. And that control sometimes could be a partnership or it could be something else. So that for me right now, the boom of my business is just it's just been a struggle to stay on top of a lot of the administrative and the tasks and also prioritize what's most important to me, which is right, like it just you can't be doing everything all at once. So you need to know when to prioritize it. So for me, if you're working with my law firm, I don't work 3:30 to 7. I do not work 3:30 to 7. You just, if we have a trial and it happens to be at 1:30 or 2, like I'll go into 4 o'clock, but I don't work 3:30 to 7 as a general practice because that's the time my kids are home and they're young. And, you know, learning that it's okay to lose a client to prioritize what's most important to you has been a struggle to learn, but it's a good struggle to have.
And the boom you're referring to is the law group, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we're averaging out about, 300 new clients a month right now. So that's insane. Yep.
Wow.
Yep. I want to cry in a corner. I'm hiring if anybody's listening to this and looking for a job.
She said it 2 times already, so you know it's true.
Hey, I'm going to give you my cell phone number next so people can text me. Like,
All right.
hey, I want to try working for this crazy lady.
When we add, you'll be able to share all that information. That's
Yeah, there
crazy.
you go.
300.
Yep.
You have to share, Dana. What marketing are you doing? I mean, how are you growing to this level? It's crazy.
So I'm on TV. I do commercials. I do
Local,
public.
right?
Yeah, I do
Okay.
local. I actually I speak on a nationwide basis on investments and real estate and all of that. I do quite a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of outreach to anything around in the area because it's just really name recognition is kind of what I worked with first. And if you are looking to have a boom, I mean, the name recognition itself doesn't work. You actually have to stand by what you deliver. So for me, I built up the companies first to a point where I was staffed enough to handle the boom to a degree where I did not think I'd be able to pay for my own lunch the next day because I had so much staff. But then, throwing into that name recognition is a big one because there's people who are coming up to me every day and they're like, I hear you, I see you everywhere. I see you on TV. I see you like in my mailbox. This is just very common. Like people are saying, I see you everywhere. And it's like, well, yeah, but what made you call me? And they're like, oh, my neighbor said that they used you for something. And then I wasn't going to call you, but then I saw a commercial with you when I was in the hospital with my mom. And then, you just messaged me on Facebook for a happy birthday. I'm like, you did it. So just put yourself out there and just make sure you have the recognition, make sure people know who you are. Because, I think a lot of realtors just, especially like if that's my niche, they'll be like, well, people I know I'm a realtor, but why don't they call me when, they need to sell a house? Because you're not in your face about it. And, it feels annoying because when you're in the industry, it feels like other people are doing everything you're doing, but that's not who's watching you. Who's watching you is your kids' neighbors. It's the school. Like you need to just kind of be in your face about it to remind people what you do and try to deliver good, client support, I guess is a good way to say it.
So if a business owner is listening to this and they're maybe an attorney or something at all different industry, I guess just be everywhere. That's the advice. Be in TV if you can, be online, be in podcasts. You said mail, so you also do, I guess, direct mail as well.
So, yeah, so I do TV, direct mail. I do a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of public speaking. I sponsor a lot of events. I go to a lot of events. If you've seen me at any event, I come in with like 3 or 4 employees. It's not just me because I can't walk through the entire room by myself. My employees carry business cards. They kind of know what they're doing. And then a lot of follow-up too. You're not going to make business by people just knowing who you are. Like they'll recognize you, sure, but I do other stuff, right? Like if I see somebody on Facebook is talking about, their newborn child, like don't just be a business. Talk to them about the kid, be open, be honest. I'm all about being honest. I'll call them and be like, hey, like, listen, I had severe postpartum depression with my first. I didn't realize. You doing okay? You want me to bring you some food? And they're like, wow, I don't even know you. And I'm like, that's all right. I'm sending you food right now. And it's just you're being a good human, and being a good human and you're everywhere sort of adds great value to people.
So you're also in the community, and you're doing all this yourself, whether you're on Facebook groups. This is you responding, not some VA or admin or something, or
Correct. Yep. And then, I mean, I found you by asking you to be on your podcast, right? Like,
yeah,
so there's quite a lot. And, most people are like, oh, wow, you've been featured on so many podcasts. And I'm like, you should see the rejection pile. You should see the rejection pile.
yeah, it's all numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's business though. That people don't understand. That's business.
Right. If your rejection pile is smaller than your yes pile, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
You're not putting yourself enough to people to reject you enough. So you're like, I'll try again. It's fine.
Is there a leader as far as marketing? I know you said you do all these channels, but is there like a number one that's head and shoulders above everyone, whether it's TV or I don't know, radio, if you do radio or podcast? Is there a one that's like, this is the money maker?
No, not really. I mean, I think it's just the little things that people remember. So like when I first started, realtors, they do a lot of postcards. So I started doing postcards a lot, like handwritten postcards to people and try to be genuine with it and try to reach out genuinely. And then, they would be like, wow, who's this person? And then next thing you know, they see you on TV. So it's just, for me, it was just a repetition and standing by your goals and being a good person while you do it. I think the TV helps. I definitely have a lot of people who say they see me on TV, but I don't, I'm not equating it to business quite yet. I think if you're doing any sort of marketing and you're looking for your ROI to like kind of increase right away, marketing is not for that, right? Like marketing, well, that's not true. There's branding and there's marketing, and you should figure out sort of what you're doing. Are you branding? Are you marketing? And which one are you trying to accomplish? Because with marketing, you're trying to sort of also like get the leads, but there's a lot of branding when it comes to like a commercial, right? There's a lot
Hmm.
of people just seeing you. um, a couple weeks ago, I got a negative Facebook comment on my law firm, and it said something like, I saw your commercial, so stupid. I can't believe like they'd let children run a law firm, because I made the commercial very funny. And, I got excited. I took a screenshot of it. I sent it to my employees and I was like, guys, we've made it. And they're like, they're literally hating on you. And I was like, you got to be big enough for people to know who you are, for them to hate you. And then, just last week we got another one. Somebody emailed me at like 3, 4 in the morning and said she saw my commercial and she thought it was ridiculous and like she would never hire me. And I just responded with, it's 3 in the morning and you Googled me to find my personal email to the law firm when I have a staff of I don't know how many. So whether or not you like the commercial, it's doing its job.
That is so true. I feel the same way. If you don't have hate, that means you haven't made it yet.
Right. Yeah. So,
I just wish they wouldn't have dinged you with the 5 star and the Google review because that's the only thing. Email me, that's fine, but just don't leave me a review and give me 1 star just because you don't like my commercial.
right. But you know what? Google actually says that they don't care about whether or not it's a 1 or a 5. They're actually looking at the business owners responding. So make sure you respond to all of them.
Oh, that's what it is now?
Hmm.
Okay. All
Yep.
right. That's good. I didn't know. Speaking about people reaching out to you, we're coming to an end here shortly. So where can they reach out to more? If they want to learn more about what you're doing, Diana, where can they go to?
So actually give my cell phone number right on these podcasts. Anybody could text me and I guarantee a response. My cell number
And
is
it's actually your
443.
cell?
It's actually my cell. And
Wow.
I give it on TV too. I give it on TV too. And I will tell you, I have people call me during the live TV to check if it is. And I can guarantee you it is. I've had this number since I was 14. My cell number is 443-739-6724. Shoot me a text.
Wow. Did does your phone actually get blown up? I mean, you're handing it out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes. So there's you should see my phone.
I know you have a young family at home. So what do you do? I know you actually said from after 3:30 you're closed, you're done. So with someone's no?
3:30 to 7. 3:30 to 7. I'm working 7 to like midnight. But 3:30 to 7 is the time I'm with my kids.
So if someone's texting you at 4, you're not responding right away, of course, but then you're going to respond later.
Yep. Yeah. And now I just got the iPhone beta like 18 or whatever it is. They do time text messages now, which is great.
Oh, so meaning you can just set the timer and it goes out automatically.
Yep. Yeah. I'm very excited about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Diana, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and advice. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course, pleasure's all mine. Take care. Thank you.
All right.